Hey, welcome to week 3 of our series Cancelled, as we talk about how God's love for us endures and how we can learn to love other people even when it's difficult sometimes. So this week we want to talk about envy. Have you ever envied someone? You know, not just in like, oh, that's cool, I wish I had that thing that they have, but the kind of jealousy that just creeps up and fills your soul, where you find yourself thinking about them sometimes, even beyond what you normally should. Or maybe you start acting and treating someone different, not because they've done anything wrong, but because you're so envious of them that you just end up lashing out. I've had a couple times in my life where this happened. One when I was a little kid. I was really into Star Wars. Okay, let's be honest, I'm still really into Star Wars. But I tried to collect the action figures, and there was one action figure that I couldn't get. It was Chewbacca. And everyone wanted Chewbacca, but it was sold out everywhere. No one knew where to find it. But my next door neighbor, Trevor, he had a Chewbacca. And I envied him, and it made me angry because he had all of them. He even had the Darth Vader collector case you could put it in, and he would go around and be like, I have everything. And I would like show him what toy I got, and he's like, oh, you have that one? That's not as good as this one. And it made me hate him, even though he was like my best friend. So one day I actually stole his Chewbacca. Now normally I would never do this, but I was so done with his attitude, and I wanted to feel like I had something cool that no one else had. So I actually stole it. And it was kind of dumb because like everyone knows it wasn't my Chewbacca, and I'm like walking around with it. My mom's like, where did you get that? We've been trying to find that forever. And I'm like, I found it somewhere. And of course I got caught and I had to give it back. And I was like, why would I even do that? Well, it was because of envy. But it's not just when I was a little kid. When I first went off to Bible college, I actually found this one guy and I got really envious of him. His name was Keith, and he was a really cool guy. He was actually one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And he was trying to be my friend, and I actually treated him like a jerk. I treated him like a jerk, if I'm honest, because I envied him. He was a lot of the things I wasn't. He was like really good looking, handsome guy. He was really popular with all of the people on our dorm floor. He was super athletic. He also did really well in school, and it just seemed like everything he put his mind to, he just did well. And he never thought highly of himself or bragged. He was actually one of the most humble people I met. But I always found ways to, whenever I could, try and cut him down. If he did like 23 things right and one thing did go wrong, I'd always point out the one thing that was wrong. And he would try and be friends with me, and I'd be like, whatever. And I'd be like, oh, he's just a dumb jock. I don't want to be like him. He was a nice guy. I was envious of him, and I let that envy poison the friendship we could have had for a long time. And it wasn't until someone else confronted me on it that I realized. You see, envy in our life acts like a poison. And sometimes we call it the green-eyed monster because it has a way of coloring everything around it. And I have this jug of water here as a demonstration of what envy can look like. So let's say you're trying out for the basketball team at the school, and there's only one main position left, and you and another person are going for it, and they get the position, and you end up as the backup for them. And at first you're like, no, it's no big deal, I'm cool with it. But inside, your envy has started to fester. And it's pretty subtle at first. When your friends ask you about it, you're like, nah, it's all okay. But you can't help sneak in a comment about how that guy is just so entitled and full of himself and just lucky because your game was a little bit off that day. So suddenly it wasn't about him being good. It's about, he was just lucky. And then at practice a couple weeks later, the coach gives you a high five, but you see that he actually goes and talks to this other guy for like 2 minutes and starts talking to him about what a great job he did. And something inside of you just gets really angry. And the envy begins to grow. And suddenly you're bad-mouthing him behind his back to your other friends and being like, yeah, he's just so lucky. His parents, they just buy him everything. And he was able to go to this camp and they got him these sneakers. And that's why he's so good. If I had the stuff he had, I would have been, destroying him in the tryouts. And this goes on until finally, one day you're at the game and you're actually hoping that he's going to look bad, even if it costs your team the win, because you're so envious, you actually want him to fail. And suddenly your envy has colored everything in your life. Suddenly you don't even care about your team anymore because you're so angry at that guy and you want to see him fail. Maybe you're even secretly dreaming that he'll get injured so you can get on the court and shine instead. That's what envy does to us. And it's why the Bible warns against it, because it's a poison that creeps in slowly and subtly, but it fills every space if we allow it to. It colors every part of our lives. The Bible warns about this kind of thing. In Proverbs chapter 27, verses 3 and 4, it says this: "A stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but the resentment caused by a fool is even heavier. Anger is cruel and wrath is like a flood, but jealousy is even more dangerous." You see, the Bible knows that jealousy and envy, it can actually, it's not only hurts other people, it hurts us when we hold on to it. It's something, that's why we use poison as a descriptor for it, because it affects and harms us as much as it harms the other person, sometimes even more. And so we have to learn to let go of envy. There's a story in the Bible about two men. One was King Saul. He was a great king. He was head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the kingdom. Everyone looked up to him, and he was chosen by God to be the first ruler of Israel. Now, the interesting thing was he didn't even want to be the king at the start. But once he'd been made king, he kind of got used to it. And he got used to everyone talking about how awesome he was and how strong he was. He led the Israelites into many battles and they won them. And people would sing his praises, and he kind of got used to the hype. But then came David. And God had chosen David to be his successor. And Saul had known this. But instead of realizing that everything he had came from God, he became angry and jealous of David. Now, David had sworn to follow Saul and be faithful to him, but Saul couldn't see any of that. He couldn't see the loyalty. He couldn't see any of David's good properties because the jealousy overcame him. David was a great general too, and he went out and fought many battles. Maybe in Sunday school you grew up hearing the story of David fighting Goliath and defeating him. And after that battle happened, David became so popular that they started writing songs about him. And one day King Saul was going around in his chariot, and he heard the people singing celebrations as they came home from a victory. And the song they sang went like this: "Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands." And when Saul heard that, envy began to eat inside of him, again, like a poison. It colored everything that happened. Even when David did good things, Saul would get mad at him. One time, David was just playing his harp, which he was hired to by the king to do, to calm him when the king got into bad moods. And he got so angry, he picked up a spear and threw it at him and tried to kill him. At one point, David was in so much danger because of Saul's jealousy and envy that he had to go hide in the desert or Saul was going to kill him. And that jealousy consumed Saul. It made him irrational. He started losing the battles. He started alienating his family members who were speaking up on David's behalf, and it ended up costing him eventually his life and his kingdom, all because of envy. So God warns us to avoid envy. So here's the hard question. Is there anyone or anything that you are jealous of, that you have envy of? What has that envy caused you to do? Maybe it's in the past or in the present that has caused harm in your life. And is there anything that you need to let go of, or that you have let go of in the past because you realized it was envy eating at you? God doesn't tell us no because he doesn't want us to have good things. God tells us no because he knows that when we hold on to envy, it destroys us and the people around us. And so as we follow Jesus, we let go of envy and we instead practice thankfulness. So what do you need to be thankful that you do have instead of be envious that you don't have? All right, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week to wrap up our series, Canceled. See you then.